Hey friends, Dr. Graves here. It is 12:30 Tuesday, September 25th. Maybe I need to rename the live stream to the 12:30 broadcast, but I also am changing from trying to live stream on YouTube to Facebook because it appears that the system seems to work a little bit better. Any case, I may switch back and forth. Hopefully that some of you will find it. I am linking the videos to my YouTube channel as well as they will be on Facebook, of course. Okay, so let me just send a note out to Facebook. On Facebook. No. Some people, let's see, had a few people that said they were maybe interested, and hopefully they'll be able to find me over here. Ask your questions, of course. I've got a few topics to cover today, as I said in the description in the event. I talked yesterday through my cycling page about cyclocross. I won't be talking about biking so much here, but I'd like to pick up the conversation from last week, first talking about carbs and the entry into ketogenic diet. And rather than talk a lot about the specifics of the ketogenic diet, I wanted to discuss what does carb cutting look like. I think a good start for some of us is to not worry so much about getting a diet absolutely correct, but instead to begin to make some changes. And I think a lot of us intuitively, inherently, we just eat carbohydrates. We don't really think about it. And I guess first I wanted to define what a carbohydrate is. Sometimes I take things for granted that we all understand the same things. And of course, the way information is presented out there, I think we sometimes have a distorted view of what we're talking about. So when it comes to the diet and carbs, carbohydrates, we're talking about a very easily identified group of foods. So carbohydrates, technically, as far as the chemical definition of a carbohydrate, it's the molecular structure of it. I'm not going to go into that, but it has to do with hydrocarbons and how things essentially grow. If you think of carbohydrates, it usually means it's from plants. So plants make a lot of carbohydrates via photosynthesis and absorption of absorption of carbon dioxide. And they release oxygen for us. So anyway, in the plants, they actually build carbohydrates. So a potato makes starch, that's a carbohydrate, and a tree makes carbohydrates as it grows. So carbohydrates, there are two main types when we talk about diet. There is the kind of carbohydrate that turns into sugar, and there's the kind of carbohydrate that does not. And so I think those are the two main categories that we really need to be concerned about. I think both are important to understand and have human nutrition implications. So for instance, the kind that turns into sugar we think of as energy and as fuel. So when we eat pasta, when we eat starch, so again, plant foods, think of plants growing, producing starch and carbohydrates. Often those carbohydrates are stored in the seeds of the food or in a reserve energy part of the food, like in a root. And so potatoes, corn, of course, corn is a seed. It stores a lot of starch. And fruits, of course, you've got the seeds and it's got the starch or sugar surrounding that in the form of the fruit. And so it's been a normal part of life on this planet that animals have consumed seeds and carbohydrates from plants to survive. And so inherently, there's nothing wrong with that. And when we talk about reducing carbohydrate intake, we're talking about something very specific that animals can benefit by alternating their food sources. And so just want to be clear, there's nothing inherently evil or wrong with carbohydrates and starch. Part of the problem is what happens to carbohydrates when humans begin to do food processing and creating all kinds of fun things that we find on the supermarket shelf. We have been very good at creating concentrated starches and sugars in foods because we hit the brain receptors when we consume them, and we make people feel happy and we make people feel like they want more. There's no better way to get people to overeat and to buy your products than by putting extra starch and sugar in them, as we all know. So that's the main form of carbohydrates that we talk about and refer to when we talk about lowering carbohydrates. There is another form of carbohydrate in plants and in foods that is not turned into sugar, and that's called fiber. Now, fiber is very important as well, and it does more of a structural or physical bulking effect in the bowel when we eat. And so when we eat, we need something to kind of carry the nutrition in, and we need something to help carry toxins out. And it turns out that fiber serves that purpose. It fills up our appetite. It provides essential nutrients to our microbiome, or the flora of our intestinal tract. And fiber actually helps carry toxins out of the body as we release them out of the liver and into the intestinal tract. The fiber that we eat holds on to a lot of those toxins and actually carries it out and helps us have normal bowel function for elimination. And so many know that common problems of a low fiber diet might be constipation, and often doctors are recommending that we increase fiber for that reason. So obviously fiber should come from food mostly. We should eat it, in our fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds and legumes. If we're talking about reducing our carbs as far as starch and sugar, we should choose fiber-rich sources of foods that don't have a lot of carbs in them as well. So, so two main forms of carbohydrates: starch and sugar, and the other category is the fiber. And of course, we need some of both, but it's been shown that humans can actually do quite well with very little carbohydrate intake, and we don't do very well with no fiber. And so that's one reason why when we lower our carbohydrate intake, we need to track starch and sugar as the as the carbs we're reducing. We don't need to track, or we shouldn't reduce the intake of starch and, fiber. Let's see if I can keep it straight. We don't want to lower our intake of fiber. We want to lower the intake of starch and sugar. So hopefully that I haven't made it even more complicated, but it's easy to identify on a label, food label. You look for that total carbohydrate on the label, and you look at how much fiber is in there, and you subtract the fiber from the carbohydrate total, and you can get your starch and sugar amount there. It'll list also, of course, the sugars, and you want to minimize those. So when we talk about reducing carbs, what we're really saying is let's cut out those starchy foods. So it means cutting out grains primarily, excessive amounts of fruits, juice, added sugar foods, anything that's got, sugar that's coming from an unnatural source or it's been added in. And we're increasing healthy vegetables, nuts and seeds, and perhaps a little bit of legumes, and maybe even a little bit of whole grains, but we want to look for minimizing the amount of starch. So we're talking about, getting definitely under 100 grams of carbohydrates would be a good start. And the best way to start is really to stop buying the stuff. Get the breads out of the house. You don't need rice with every meal. You don't need that banana every day, or 3 servings of fruit. We're adding in, you're doing salads and very fiber-rich vegetables. We're adding, using good quality oils and using good protein sources like eggs and meats, fish, and nuts and seeds. And then creating ways to eat that's going to be enjoyable is what we'd like to do. So anyway, step one, I think, is really clearing out the house. So you need to either throw it away or make a new shopping list. And when you kick this off, maybe on a weekend, is start the week where you are ready with a plan and you're going to reduce those starches. So The other area I wanted to cover here today was the 3 essential supplements for fall. And it turns out they not only help for preventing the colds and flus and going into the fall season, but they also help balance your hormones. And those are 2 common issues. One is that your hormones actually support your immune system. And so it's important to support those for many reasons. But so many of us have heard of these. I'm going to actually go pause here for a second and go grab them, because I'm going to show you, and I said here in hint, one of them is not vitamin D. I don't have a problem with vitamin D. That's important too. But the 3 I wanted to talk about they're not vitamin D related. And so hold that thought while I go grab. All right, so we've got number 1 here. This is our nutrient number 1. This is vitamin A. And now vitamin A is a complex vitamin in that there's a lot of different forms of vitamins. And so when you see vitamin A on a label, it might mean that it's a different various form. So vitamin A that I'm talking about is actually active A that's found in animals. And so that's called retinol or retinoic acid. And the form that I like best is the liquid form. Bear with me while we get that to... So liquid form is often how you get this retinol, or in this case it's vitamin A palmitate. Now, just as a side note, one of the main forms of vitamin A that you do find in supplements that I'm not talking about is beta carotene. So beta carotene comes from plants and vegetables like carrots, and you do turn a proportion of that into vitamin A, but not at the level that we get when we take active vitamin A in this form. And so this is micellized vitamin A from Klaire Lab. Let's see if we can get a focus on there. This camera. Sorry about that. It's not the best image here. I don't know why I can't get it to focus. Seems like it likes to be focused on the back here. Anyway, I recommend about 25,000 IUs per day for most adults. And this is giving... now, they've recently changed, this is another point of confusion, they recently changed vitamins that are identified in international units, or IUs, into a milligram form or microgram form. And so we often have to look up the equivalencies if we're used to saying in IUs. So 1 drop of this is, let's see, it was 5,000 IUs. And that equals, I'm going to write it down so I keep track of it, 5,000 IUs of vitamin A equals 1, I can even read that, 1,000 micrograms. Yeah, so 1,507 micrograms. So 1,500, that's roughly 1.5 milligrams equals 1 drop, and 5 times that, so we're looking for 7.5 milligrams per day. All right, so had to do a little math because of a change in labeling recently, but roughly about 5 drops of this to get about 7.5 milligrams per day for most adults. Now, just as a side note, for women who may be pregnant or who could be getting pregnant, we do recommend that you keep this form of vitamin A down around 10,000 IUs or less. So you want to cut that in half, or say probably around 2 or 3 milligrams of active vitamin A is what you would want to take. It's very safe. It's just there were some studies that pointed towards some potential risk anytime we're ever concerned at all. And again, this is specific to pregnancy. So now, why do we want to take vitamin A? Well, it turns out it helps the protective barriers of the mucosal area, so the sinus tract, the lungs, the digestive tract, helps prevent against infection and fight infection. It also helps boost sex hormones, and so it can help testosterone and estrogen levels, just to name some there. Also, vitamin A helps with bone health, so it's kind of a cellular regenerator, helps to build. So all right, so moving on, the second one. Now this one is also very commonly talked about and heard, and I'm sure you all have, and let me grab that. So vitamin C, number 2, probably the most, one of the most studied vitamins around, and one of the most important. But let me talk about why that is briefly. So vitamin C also comes in some different forms, but I won't go into all that detail, but just to say, you want to get the buffered form. At least that's a better. It's a little less acidifying. It's a little bit better. So they often are called mineral ascorbates, and so in this case, esterol has it's got a calcium ascorbate in here. They also blend this with some phyto chemicals that are good too, flavonoids as they're called. So flavonoids are plant substances that help vitamin C work more efficiently and better. They're strong antioxidants. This one is just a powdered form. And so what I recommend is getting probably 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams up to twice daily. And so what I wanted to say about vitamin C that we have discovered is that the body is very good about absorbing vitamin C at the level that is required given any given situation. So for instance, when you get sick, if you're under more stress, if you're dealing with some other physical stressor, your need for and your absorption of vitamin C goes up. And so one of the promoters of vitamin C, a doctor and researcher, it's been said to take vitamin C up to what we call bowel tolerance. And so when you take vitamin C, it can cause diarrhea if you take too much. And so you want to back it down below that. Taking between 1,000 and 2,000 usually will not cause that problem. And you could go up even higher until, of course, you started to get a loose stool and you back it back down. And so, but as a maintenance level, I typically recommend you should be getting at least 1,000 twice daily, up to even 3,000 and 4,000 per day. And then if you're under increased stress, then increase that up. So things like athletes, emotional stressors, going through something emotionally stressful, and also physical stress. So mounts that on up. All right, so that's the vitamin C. Again, vitamin C, what does it do? Well, it helps adapt to stress. It helps to fight off infection. It helps to clear free radicals. We know that the liver and the adrenal glands actually use vitamin C at a very, very fast rate. One thing I should emphasize is that vitamin C is not made by the body. We need to make it. We need to get it through eating, that is. And so it's important to get that daily. It's a water-soluble vitamin, and it's eliminated so quickly, you need to replenish that regularly. Lastly, see if you could, any of you out there could guess, there are formulas that combine these three, but the last vitamin for fall that I'd like to mention. One last thing on the vitamin C, because like vitamin A, there is an effect on our hormones. Vitamin C, I mentioned it's used by the adrenals at a high rate. When we're under more stress, we dump out a lot of adrenal hormones that help us cope with that stress. And so vitamin C helps to support and regenerate adrenal function so that you can maintain good stress response. And that includes managing blood sugar and energy levels throughout the day. And if you keep your adrenals happy, you're going to keep a lot of the other hormone systems working well. So, and finally, see if anyone out there is going to guess this. We have got our friend zinc. So talked about 2 vitamins. Now we're talking about an important mineral, and that is zinc. So for cold and flu season, many of us have heard about taking zinc. I've got a couple of samples here. By the way, I'll put up some links in a bit, but I do get finicky about quality. And so the brands that I'm showing you, I will put in the description and links, and these are physician lines, physician strength and very, very high quality and purity. One of the problems with supplements that you might just go out and buy online or anywhere is the poor quality that's out there. And it's been shown even some to have contaminants that you don't want, including heavy metals and not having what they say they have in it. So I would recommend good brands on that. So lastly, the zinc. So cold and flu season, we know zinc helps to activate white blood cells. It helps what we call epithelial layers, so including skin and mucosal surfaces. So like vitamin A, it works in tandem with supporting good, strong junctions between cells. It helps the immune system work properly, and it is very, very important. Now, zinc can upset the stomach a little bit, and so I see some comments coming in, so glad to have you. Thank you for saying you're here. The zinc can upset the stomach because it's a mineral, and some minerals just do that. So I recommend taking zinc with a little bit of food. These are zinc lozenges. It's great to protect the upper respiratory tract, so cold and flu season to do that. And you can also swallow zinc. Make sure it's a chelated form. And I typically recommend somewhere around 25 milligrams a day maintenance, and that could be doubled. So if you're feeling like you're under the weather, you know, for a week or two, you could take up to say 30 and 50 milligrams a day. One side note with zinc is that it does need, it competes and works in conjunction with copper. And so you do want to balance it with copper, as this does. You won't be able to read that. Either getting copper somewhere else or taking in a supplement that's got the copper already in it. It's about a 10-to-1 ratio. Sorry, I think that's 100. Make that 100-to-1. See if I can do the math right. So that's 0.3 to 30. Yeah, so it's about 20 times actually. You need just a small amount of copper is the point. So for instance, this says 300 micrograms of copper balancing out 30 milligrams of zinc. So that is our big 3 nutrients. So I think that's probably about it today. Thank you for those who've watched and those who are watching later. I will put a link to a portal to be able to order some of this stuff. If you have questions about dosing and specifics, let me know in the comments section or reach out to me at the office. But I have a portal where you can go and get physician line. I do put a discount in there for you as well. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you all next time.